Yeah, Xfinity picture quality is insane.
The best college and pro games all in one place. This is my fantasy football, watching these games with you.
You ever tried pancakes and guac? You're about to. Yes, let's go! I got a little recipe.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity, alongside Jeff McLane. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from the MetLife Stadium press box, getting set for the Eagles' Thursday night matchup against the New York Giants. Jeff, how you doing? Jeff, I know you are talking. Currently, we cannot hear you because you are muted, but I'm sure you're saying fabulous things to us right now. Thank you so. Yes, now you're.
I thought I was unmuted. No, I didn't say anything of note. In fact, I'll probably change what I had to say because I was talking about Thursday nights and how it's affected me, but more so, I guess, the players who don't seem to still like it for the most part. But here we are. Nick Sirianni is 3-1 on Thursdays. He's 4-0 on 3 days rest. So should be interesting what the Eagles will do tonight against the Brian Daboll-led Giants team. And Daboll, of course, is 0-4 on Thursdays, and he is on the hot seat. And we'll see whether this game has anything to do with his future and whether he's still the coach of the Giants.
Players may not like a Thursday night game. However, I would imagine a lot of Philadelphia sports fans right now are in heaven with the Phillies game currently going on, the Eagles game just about to start, the Flyers also with their season opener tonight against the Florida Panthers. If you are watching this, thank you very much. We know that you could be in a lot of different places right now, but thanks for tuning in to us. As always, before we get into our conversation, you can be a part of it. Head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. You can leave us a question or a comment down there in the chat. Also, if you're watching on X, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you may be, drop us a comment or a question down in the chat, and we will get to some of those toward the end of our show today. All right, Jeff, let's jump right into it. Lots to discuss about the state of this Eagles team, they're reeling quite a bit coming off of their first loss of the season to the Denver Broncos, and it was a really tough one. They collapsed in the fourth quarter, conceding 18 unanswered points, and it was really a collective collapse, I would say. The offense had 3 straight 3-and-outs between the third and fourth quarters, including 4 penalties, and then the defense simply could not get off the field, and Denver was able to run it up on them and stage a comeback. Now, I think this is an interesting opportunity going into this Thursday night game for the Eagles to potentially get right against the New York Giants, who are 1-4, coming off of a loss to the New Orleans Saints. Old friend Kellen Moore getting his first win as the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. However, the Eagles are in a tough position because not only are they without Landon Dickerson, but they are also likely without Jalen Carter. We're still waiting officially for the inactives list. However, we saw him come out here and he just kind of briefly He briefly tested his heel out. He popped up on the injury report yesterday with an injury. It was questionable to play going into today's game, but he did not go through a full workout, talked to his agent, talked to Howie Roseman, went back up the tunnel. So, Jeff, when you look at the state of the Eagles right now, just how banged up they are to a couple of very important players, how do you view this game for them and their odds of success?
Yeah, from what I am hearing, Jalen Carter is out. He will not play with the heel injury that happened at practice on Wednesday. He did try it out and wanted to go. We know how much of a gamer he is. We saw already this year how he's played through a shoulder injury, and this just adds to it. So I'm sure it's a combination of both that's keeping him out. And the direct result of that is that Moro Jomo and Jordan Davis are just going to have to play more snaps. Now they called up Gabe Hall earlier, which suggested that Carter was unlikely to play, so he'll get some snaps, and Byron Young's also in that rotation at defensive tackle. And then the other key injury for the Eagles, of course, is Landon Dickerson, who was already deemed out because of the ankle injury that he suffered last week. Brett Toth will be in there. Toth is not Landon Dickerson, but it's not like Dickerson's been playing at his typical high level because of all the injuries that he has accumulated in his career and just this past year. But I thought Toth acquitted himself pretty well in that game. This is a different test. The defensive line of the Giants is probably the strength of their team. So we'll see how he fares against, I think maybe the best defensive tackle, at least in terms of being a nose tackle in the league, and Dexter Lawrence. Cam Jurgens is also not really 100%. He told me just last week that he's not close to it, coming off back surgery this offseason. So, yeah, the Eagles have some key injuries on 2 starting spots, and Grant Calcaterra is also out. So they'll be down their second tight end.
Jeff, the last time we were here at MetLife, all eyes were on Saquon Barkley and his return to the stadium where he played for so many years. Now it's a year later, and the state of the run game is quite a bit different. Barkley just is not having the same success as he once did the last time that he was here. You can think back to that game when Nick Sirianni came to him on the bench and asked him if he wanted to stay in an effort to meet or potentially exceed his single game career record. And ultimately, he decided to stay out. And things are very, very much different for this Eagles run game right now. Barkley had just last week 6 carries for 30 yards, including a 17-yard explosive gain that worked out really well for the Eagles. We didn't see them go back to a similar look in that game. Barkley only had 1 carry in the second half of that game. He's averaging just 3.2 yards per carry, which is quite a bit under the league average right now at 4.4 yards per carry. When you look at how this run game has been performing over the last 5 weeks, Jeff, what is at the root of those woes right now?
Wow, where should I start? I mean, there's a lot that's going on with it. And I mentioned, obviously, the injuries to Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens up the middle. Tyler Steen, I think he's played well, but he's not Mekhi Becton in terms of his run blocking. So a lot of the interior blocking hasn't been great. But I really think the biggest issue is that defenses are keyed in on not only stopping Saquon Barkley in terms of like the scheme and maybe having an extra guy in the box here and there, but for whatever reason, the Eagles are allowing teams to key in, to pick up tendencies. They're allowing them they're giving them time because they're so late in the play clock sometimes when they're getting the snap off, which allows defenses to get a bead on what's happening and particular when Saquon Barkley gets the ball, what direction he's running in or what kind of run play. This past week, it was more that they got away from it. It kind of made sense in the first half, the way that the Broncos defense was playing. But in the second half, when the Eagles have a double-digit lead, you see Nick Sirianni coach teams salt the game away on the ground, and they just couldn't do that. Now, there were myriad reasons why that happened. There was a penalty. A.J. Brown false start. There was a hold from Brett Toth. There was a missed block on another play. But right now they can't run the ball at will, and that's an issue for this team because that's been so much of what they've built their offense around. Obviously this past year, but really since Nick Sirianni took over, and certainly midway through his first season when he handed over play calling from himself to Shane Steichen, and the decision was made that, hey, let's lean into Jalen Hurts and what he can do on the ground. We have a good running back, we have a great offensive line, and that's pretty much been the recipe for success for them all these years. And right now, they just can't get it done on the ground, and it's affecting really everything else that they can do on offense.
I'm curious to see if tonight is the night for the run game to get well, simply because this Giants defense, even though they have a really talented defensive front, simply has not been very good against the run, and particularly on outside runs. They're averaging 8 yards per carry against outside of the tackles, leading the league. Perhaps that's a direction the Eagles try to go in. That's actually really the direction that they have been successful in through the first 5 games of the season. We just haven't seen a lot of it. While the run game hasn't been quite there, the passing game is also very much hot and cold. And in fact, we saw that Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Saquon Barkley had a meeting earlier in this week just to talk it out and to kind of figure out how the offense can move forward, and the way that Hurts characterized it, just figure out how they can continue to find ways to win games. And it's an interesting conversation because it's coming amid a time where the working relationships, as we discussed last week on the show, Jeff, the working relationship between Hurts and Brown has been under a lot of scrutiny. And we kind of have just seen a lot of, like, as we said, some inconsistency from this Eagles passing game, especially over the last couple of weeks, where we see a lot of, rhythm and things look good in the first half, and then they just fall off in the second half. And in particular on those 3 straight 3 and outs between the third and fourth quarters against the Denver Broncos. And AJ Brown, as we've discussed throughout the first 5 weeks of the season, has not always been heavily involved. And he was held to under 50 receiving yards for the fourth time in 5 games this season on Sunday against the Broncos. So kind of similar question, Jeff. We talked about the run game. What is at the root of the woes of the passing game right now?
Inconsistency, really. I mean, we've seen Jalen Hurts have these great halves, and then all of a sudden to flip to the other side in terms of how he's performed. And it's not just him, but he's certainly at the center of it. Kevin Patullo is at the center of it. He's calling the plays. He's building the game plan with Nick Sirianni. And I think they've had these last 2 weeks, certainly they've had success with whatever game plan that they've had coming out, more so kind of like dictating it in terms of what they want to do. But I do think there is a little bit too much of waiting to see what the defense is doing. And that's why the plays have been coming in on the later side from time to time. I don't think it's a major issue, but you're giving Jalen Hurts more at the line than typically he's ever had. And, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of reading the defense, setting certain motions, checking to different plays, giving signals to your receivers when you want them to run a certain route versus a certain coverage. And that's just kind of like slowing down the whole kind of functionality of the offense. There are other issues as well. I think, look, I've never really been in love with this scheme, quite frankly. I don't think they do enough to scheme receivers open. They kind of really, and it's understandable why they've kind of gone in that direction. They understand that they have talent. Those guys can just go out and win it. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and they do that more often than not. But what that does is when you don't have man defense and you're going up against zone, it makes it difficult for them. And that's what we're seeing a lot of this year. The Eagles are having success against man like they traditionally do, but they're having almost nothing. They're almost doing very little against zone. And look, zone is there's so many different zones that you can use. So that's kind of like a general term, but it does kind of cover in terms of what has been giving the Eagles issues. And, Jalen Hurts has gotten so much better at, versus the blitz. But now teams are kind of fanning blitz and dropping guys and giving them only 3 and 4 man rushes and dropping into these deep zones. And that's confusing him. And that's, and maybe Kevin Patullo isn't ahead of the curve on diagnosing that and having plays because you're so reactionary to how you call your plays. So there are a number of issues with this offense. We've talked about it. But, I think, the run game to me is the bigger issue right now because everything is built off that. But if they can't get the pass game going, considering all the guys that they have at their disposal in terms of throwing the ball, then that's an issue as well.
Well, let's flip it over to the Giants and what to look for when the Giants have the ball. In particular, it's going to be in the hands of Jackson Dart, the rookie quarterback who's going into his 3rd NFL start in today's game. He looked good in his debut, and then last week slipped a bit, to say the least, against the Saints. He had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and 1 fumble total. 5 turnovers on the day for the Giants. Not a recipe for success for the team going up against the team in the Eagles, who does not turn the ball over very much and is looking to force a turnover in today's game after not forcing one last week. When you look at the receivers at the disposal of Dart in today's game, he hasn't got a whole lot of players out there. Malik Neighbors is out for the season, and then now Darius Slayton dealing with a hamstring injury. He is out tonight. Expecting to see quite a bit of 12 personnel behind Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger at tight end there. But when you look at Dart's capability, another very mobile quarterback, the Eagles have faced quite a few of those this season, is going to scramble. They're going to use him on some designed runs. What is the key, especially without Jalen Carter in today's game, to containing him?
Yeah, I mean, they've seen some scramblers, Baker Mayfield. I think that, Bo Nix would qualify as a scramble, although they kind of kept him contained. They sort of had a spy here and there. I would imagine they're going to spy Dart because he's, look, as you mentioned, Malik Neighbors isn't in, and it's a real drastic fall off from there in terms of who they have at that spot. So it's, he may have to do a lot of this on his own, and it makes sense to have someone keep an eye on him because, he can do that. You've seen that, obviously not a large sample of plays, but he's athletic. He can run. He's got good kind of, in terms of like spatial awareness when he is out there in the open field. So the Eagles have to be aware of that. Now, in terms of the gun run game and having him involved as a +1 factor in the run game, the Eagles haven't really seen a lot of that. But they've played it over the years. It's just being disciplined in your assignments, right? If there's an unblocked defender on the edge in these zone read types of plays, those guys can't be crashing too much, or that there has to be not playing out of your responsibility and letting everybody kind of do their job. If you don't do that, then that's when Dart will be able to break off maybe a long run here or there. So they have to, they've seen it here before with Daniel Jones. He had the same capabilities, and they had issues with that at times. I remember one time watching Daniel Jones run for almost, was it back in Philly? I think it was, for almost 70 yards. He didn't quite make it to the end zone, but he is capable, and I think Dart falls under that same category.
Well, the Eagles, just generally speaking against the run, have not looked their dominant selves as they were in 2024. The Eagles are allowing 4.7 yards per carry, which ranks 25th in the league. So the Giants may look to try to run it quite a bit on the Eagles. They've got Cam Scadaboo, added him in the draft, and then Tyrone Tracy is back in the lineup tonight after dealing with a shoulder injury the last 2 games. That said, the Giants rushers have not been knock your socks off through the first 5 games of the season. Tracy had just 68 yards on 22 carries, averaging 3.1 yards per carry in the games that he was active, and then Scadaboo only averaging 3.8 yards per attempt. So we've talked about a lot of these kind of the roots of a lot of the issues that the Eagles have been dealing with right now. But when you look at the run game in particular, what do you think it is? What is the thing that they are struggling with most? And do you think they have an opportunity to rebound here against this Giants rushing attack?
Yeah, I don't see it being anywhere near the issue it is on the offensive side of the ball. Vic Fangio types defenses, you're going to want to compel teams to run on certain downs, and you'll be willing to take that here and there because you're just trying to keep explosive plays off the books, and that's a way of doing it. And last year they weren't the greatest run defense, but a lot of that just has to do with how many numbers. It's a numbers game. How many guys does Vic Fangio devote to stopping the run? And last year he didn't really have to do a lot of 5-man fronts or even that 6-1 penny up front. We saw a little bit of that last week, and maybe he's got to do a little bit more of that the more they struggle in stopping the run. But just like the Giants, the Eagles. Run defense. It could be the Giants' opportunity to maybe move their offense because, I should have mentioned this before, as much as the Eagles run defense has struggled, they're facing one of the worst run offenses struggled. They're facing one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. And it could be the perfect bomb for the Eagles this week to get that back going. And I think the Giants, the same thing kind of applies to them. As you mentioned, they're getting Tracy back. Scadapoo is an exciting type of runner. So, and then of course you factor in the quarterback into that run game as well. And maybe that's their best opportunity to keep this game close, maybe grind it out, get into the fourth quarter, and maybe they have a chance.
If you were not with us earlier in the show, no Landon Dickerson. He had already been ruled out of today's game with an ankle injury. No Jalen Carter. He popped up on the injury report yesterday dealing with a heel injury. Carter has been banged up throughout the season as he's been nursing a shoulder injury as well. And then on the flip side of that, some good news for the Eagles on the injury front. Nakobe Dean is back, and he is back on the active roster as he has been recovering from a torn patellar tendon in his knee. It's been a long time coming for Dean. He sustained the injury back in the wild card round of the playoffs against the Green Bay Packers and has been gradually working himself back, had his practice window open last week, said at the time that he felt like he was able to fully go then, and the Eagles decided to wait a little bit, and now he is available to play in tonight's game. Jeff, we're not expecting to see Nakobe Dean just jump right back into action. When we spoke to Vic Fangio earlier in the week, he said that it's probably going to be a pretty limited role for Dean right off the bat. But I think the bigger question for me, Jeff, is what is the long-term plan for Nakobe Dean? Because you've got Zach Bond, Jahad Campbell at inside linebacker. Both players have been playing at a very high level through the first 5 games of the season. I wouldn't think you want to really mess with that chemistry, and especially with the development of Campbell at this point. What long-term role do you envision for Dean in this defense?
Well, if you're talking long-term for the season, probably just, be ready. Special teams. They're not going to mess with Jahad Campbell. He's a first-round pick. He's playing well. There are times when he makes some mistakes here and there, and he's still trying to get his sea legs in the NFL. But I don't see them doing a rotation. Vic Fangio does not like typically to do that. You do see that increasingly more around the NFL, but he's not typically the one to do that, and has said as much before. And in fact, we saw it at safety with Andrew Makuba and Sidney Brown, and it only took 3 or 4 games before they went to Makuba full time. And that's what Vic wants. And when you have 2 quality inside linebackers, and Zach Bond's not going anywhere, they just signed a contract extension. Jahad Campbell isn't going anywhere, and Nakobe Dean is in the last year of his 4-year rookie contract. And look, they really tapped into him, and Vic got the best out of him last year. Nakobe had a lot to do with the success of the team before he went down. Great guy in the locker room, great guy, smart football player, great guy to have. And maybe, you could find a way to entice him to come back. But he should have options on the open market. So I think more than likely it's just special teams and when needed, inside linebacker. If one of those guys suffers an injury, he'll be the first guy up.
Yeah, well, for now, we will see how much he's able to get out there in tonight's game. All right, let's transition into our player picks. We've discussed plenty of players that we're going to be keeping an eye on tonight. However, if you could just single out one, Jeff, whose performance are you most intrigued to see?
Yeah, I mentioned this briefly before with Cam Jurgens and the injury that he's coming off of. And, look, hey, all credit to him playing through that back injury in the NFC Championship when he wasn't supposed to play. They did activate him. Landon Dickerson played some center, and then he couldn't go. He suffered a knee injury, so Cam had to, I don't know what they shot him up with, a horse tranquilizer or something, and got him out there. I'm joking, obviously. They shot him up with something, I'm sure. But he went out there and toughed it out and just got the job done, and they won the game. And then same thing with the Super Bowl. Wasn't sure if he was going to play or not, but he did. Won a Super Bowl, of course. So all credit to Cam for playing. He's a tough guy playing through injury, and he's clearly not 100% if you watch the film versus his first season as the starting center. Just getting pushed back a little bit more than I typically have seen him on those kind of bull rushes up the middle, and then in the run game, kind of you've seen it several times, maybe even more than that in terms of Cam just not being his typical athletic self when they do get him outside. So that's been an issue, and with Dexter Lawrence, that is going to be quite the chore, certainly in the run game, but also in the pass rush when he lines up directly over him. And Jason Kelsey, Cam Jurgens' predecessor, had his hands full often with Dexter Lawrence. He talked about it many times, one of the toughest guys he's ever faced. He had his share of wins, and Lawrence certainly had his share of wins as well. So Cam did very well versus him last year in both those games. The one game. The second game he didn't play, obviously, the last game of the season when they rested all the starters. But he did very well against Dexter Lawrence. As you mentioned, that was the game where Saquon went off for 70-something yards, and Cam had a lot to do with that. But this is going to be a different challenge for him because of the injury. Dexter Lawrence, the numbers haven't been popping out as much for him, but he's still a handful. He's still one of the biggest, toughest guys to block in the NFL.
I am going to flip it over to the other side of the ball for the Eagles for my player pick. I'm really intrigued to see how Azeez Ojulari fares in today's game. He was inactive for the first 4 weeks of the season, just kind of toiling at the bottom of the depth chart. And then all of a sudden, Nolan Smith goes on injured reserve with a triceps injury. Obo Okoronkwo goes on injured reserve, season-ending injured reserve with a triceps injury. And Vic Fangio is then forced to turn to Ojulari. Now, Ojulari had not been active, he explained, through the first 4 weeks of the season because not only was he low on the depth chart, but he also doesn't have any special teams ability. He doesn't contribute on special teams. So from a numbers perspective, to have him active over someone like Okoronkwo, who does contribute to special teams, didn't make sense. However, now they're in this position where they need all the depth on the edge that they can get. And I got to be honest, Jeff, I thought Ojulari flashed in his season debut, his Eagles debut against the Broncos. He played 34 snaps, which was second only to Jalix Hunt among the edge rushers. And he had some decent stats, 3 tackles, including 1 for a loss. He looked good in the run game. He also generated a pressure as well. Has not been a plentiful sack-filled season for the edge rusher core just in general, but I'm wondering if Ojulari has a little bit of extra juice against his former Giants team. So he'll be someone that I have circled when he is out there on the field. All right, Jeff, crystal ball out. Time to make your prediction. What's your final score of today's game?
I have the Eagles winning by more than 10 points, 27-16. Look, they should normally come up here and whoop this team. The Giants are reeling to some extent. They've already kind of gone to the rookie quarterback. I don't think they quite plan to do it at this point. That might have been born out of a little bit of desperation for Brian Daboll, who is clearly on the hot seat, as I mentioned before. They now have some injuries. The key one being Malik Neighbors. So offensively, they weren't good to begin with, and now all of a sudden you got a rookie quarterback and you're missing, and he's missing his best receiver. And that's an issue, especially when you look at that offensive line. And this has been a years-long issue for the Giants. They just have not been able to kind of get that right. And they do have a good left tackle in Andrew Thomas, but the rest of the line is suspect. And I just think that the Eagles are going to have the advantage up front there. I know that they haven't generated a lot of sacks. I think they only have 7 this year, only 1.5 from the edge rusher unit. But Vic Fangio said he's been happy with the pressure. And I think for the most part, he's right when he says so. But we've also seen Vic Fangio increasingly dial out blitzes, and that's probably because the 4-man rush hasn't gotten home as much. And I think that's going to be an issue for the rookie tonight. I think this is going to be another Vic Fangio masterclass, and I like him against most quarterbacks. I certainly like him against a rookie quarterback making only his third start. And the other side of the ball, I know the Eagles' offense's problems are long. But the Giants, if they can keep that edge rusher unit, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, if they can keep them in check, and I would think that Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata can, they're 2 of the best tackles in the NFL. They're used to being out on an island, and they can just keep doubling Dexter Lawrence in the middle and keep Jalen Hurts from getting pressured. I think that should be enough for this team, and I do think that the run game could make a reappearance here against a very suspect run defense. And Saquon Barkley, we all know how he loves to run here and run against his former team.
I agree with you, Jeff. I think it is going to be an Eagles victory. I've got a final score of 31-16. As we've already stated throughout this show, really, I think the Eagles have the greatest advantage when the Giants have the ball. The Giants offense, and granted, they have changed quarterbacks at the helm, but they have been really terrible situationally this season. They're third to last. They are last in the league in red zone percentage. They're third to last in third down percentage, and the Eagles have been pretty strong in both areas. The Eagles have offensively, when the Eagles have the ball, they have been very strong in the red zone too. And the Giants defense is actually, that's one of the areas of the field that they have been done pretty well, and it is in the red zone. But ultimately, I think that's really one of the only areas that they've done really well in is in the red zone. So I think the Eagles are going to have their opportunities, as you mentioned, to run the ball tonight. I think they'll have their opportunities to pass the ball too. This could be the opportunity to rip the Band-Aid off, just as coming off of their first loss of the season, to rebound potentially against a really a Giants team that's in a tough spot that just lost to arguably one of the worst teams in the league in the New Orleans Saints. So we're very eager to see how this Eagles team fares in tonight's game, and if they're really able to make a statement and to get on the same page and to reestablish that rhythm that we once saw from them. The offense at times last season also had its struggles, but they were able to pull through in key moments and ultimately on their way and win that Super Bowl. So we'll see if the Eagles are able to kind of get back on the same page in tonight's game. All right, Jeff, I'm going to have you make one more untraditional, a little uncharacteristic prediction too. The Phillies are playing right now. If you were not aware, it is tied.
No score.
No score.
Pitcher's duel.
What is your prediction, not only for tonight's game, but also for the series too?
Oh, really? Wow. I get to make a baseball pick. I guess my prediction is pain. Pain for Eagles fans if the Phillies lose, and pain for the Giants if the Phillies come back. I don't know. Sure, why not? They'll come back and win the series in 5.
Ooh, wow. Okay. I think
just like Vic Fangio said, right? He said that prior to Game 3.
Yeah, it didn't seem like he had watched the game, so then I don't know. But anyway,
he's a noted Phillies fan, so Vic knows his baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'll win tonight, and I think they will lose the series. I don't know. That's just me.
Boy!
Don't come for me.
Let's check the comments section out here. A lot of hate for Olivia.
No pitchforks, please. Well, That'll do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Inquirer live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. We'll be over on inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, chatting with you and answering your questions throughout the evening. So if we did not get to your question in today's show, have no fear. We will continue the conversation over there in just a little bit.
And if you want even more Eagles insight, please check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with exclusive reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed about your favorite team. We now have day after podcasts with one of my colleagues after every game. You can listen to Uncovering the Birds at inquirer.com/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Once again, that is all for us tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.